I never imagined that a single piece of paper could shatter my entire world. But on a rainy afternoon, hidden deep inside the old barn that smelled of hay and dust, I found a letter that destroyed not only my trust but also my marriage overnight. And the worst part, I wasn't supposed to find it. It wasn't meant for me. Yet once I read those words, there was no turning back. My name is Emily, and when I married John, the wealthy farmer who owned acres of land stretching beyond the horizon, I thought I was stepping into a life of stability, maybe even a fairy tale. People in town whispered behind my back, saying I was too young, too naive, that I married him for his fortune, but I didn't care. I loved John, or at least I thought I did. From the moment I set foot on the farm, I felt like an outsider. His family never accepted me. His son from his first marriage looked at me with nothing but contempt, and his sister, oh, she made it her mission to remind me every chance she got that I didn't belong. Still, John's reassuring smile, his gentle hands, and his promise of a future together kept me going. Life on the farm was not easy, though. There were days when the silence of the fields felt suffocating. I wasn't raised around endless acres of corn or cattle. It was a different world, and I had to adapt quickly. But at night, when John wrapped his arms around me, I convinced myself I had made the right choice, until that letter. It was a stormy day. The wind howled outside, and the rain drummed against the tin roof of the barn. I had gone in looking for an old lantern. The barn was filled with relics from John's past, broken tools, rusted equipment, and forgotten trunks covered in dust. That's when I noticed a loose board in the far corner, near the hay bales. Something about it seemed off. Curiosity pulled me closer. My fingers trembled as I pried it open, revealing a small wooden box wedged behind it. Inside, wrapped in yellowed cloth, was a folded envelope. My heart pounded as I unwrapped it, and when I saw the handwriting on the front, my breath caught in my throat. It was John's. At first, I thought it was some old love letter from his younger days, maybe a sentimental keepsake he had hidden away. But when I opened it, my world cracked in half. "Dearest Anna," it began. My blood ran cold. Anna wasn't me. The further I read, the more my hands shook. A letter wasn't instead just affectionate. It was passionate, intimate. He wrote about nights under the stars, about promises of leaving everything behind for her. He wrote about love that was more real than any ring or vow. And the date? Oh God, the date. It was written just 3 months before our wedding. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. My husband, the man who swore he loved me, had been writing to another woman just months before he put a ring on my finger. Worse yet, the letter suggested their affair had gone on long before I entered the picture. I dropped the paper to the barn floor, my chest heaving, my stomach twisting in knots. I wanted to scream, to tear the walls down with my bare hands, but all I could do was stand there, rain pouring outside, clutching the fragments of my broken heart. When I finally stumbled back to the house, John was sitting by the fire reading the newspaper as if nothing in the world could shake him. I looked at him, this man who had promised me forever, and all I saw was a liar. I didn't confront him right away. I couldn't. That night, I lay awake next to him, staring at the ceiling while he slept soundly, and I kept asking myself the same question over and over: who was Anna, and why did he hide her? The next morning, I tried to act normal, but my mind was racing. I replayed every moment of our marriage, every smile, every kiss, every word he ever spoke to me. Had it all been a lie? I went back to the barn that day, hoping, praying that maybe there was more, maybe another letter that could explain everything. But all I found were more questions. Tucked inside the same wooden box was a small photograph. A woman, young, beautiful, with eyes that seemed to pierce through the photograph itself. On the back, in John's handwriting, it said, "Forever yours, A." My knees buckled. I sat down on the cold barn floor, clutching the photo to my chest. Who was she to him? Was she gone? Was she still alive? And did his family know? I couldn't keep the secret any longer. That evening, I confronted him. My hands shook as I slammed the letter on the table in front of him. "Who is Anna?" I demanded. My voice cracked, but my anger burned through every syllable. For the first time since I'd known him, John's face turned pale. He stared at the letter, then at me, and for a moment I saw fear in his eyes. That fear told me everything I needed to know. Anna wasn't just some distant memory, she was real, and she was dangerous to everything I thought we had. "Emily," he began, but his voice faltered. "You weren't supposed to find that." Those words cut deeper than the letter itself. We're in set supposed to find it. I shouted, so it's Set's true? You loved her? You promised her everything while you were promising me the same? He reached for my hand, but I pulled away, my tears hot against my cheeks. I need you to tell me everything, I said, my voice trembling now. He hesitated. The silence stretched between us like a noose tightening around my throat. Finally, he sighed, his shoulders slumping, and he whispered the words that would change my life forever. She was the love of my life before you, Emily, and I never stopped loving her. When those words left his lips, it felt like the ground beneath me had given way. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself, but the truth already cut deeper than any fall could. You never stopped loving her? I whispered, my voice trembling. Then what am I to you, John? A replacement? A distraction? Someone to fill the silence of your empty house? He looked at me with eyes that once seemed so warm, but now only felt cold, calculating, guilty. He didn't answer right away, and that silence screamed louder than any confession. Finally, he said, Emily, I married you because I thought I could move on. I thought time would heal what I lost with Anna, but seeing that letter again, it reminds me of things I can set change. My chest tightened as if invisible hands were squeezing the life out of me. I stumbled back, shaking my head. You thought you could move on? John, our entire marriage is built on a lie. Every promise you made, every kiss was just you pretending. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall in front of him. I turned, storming out of the kitchen, needing air, needing space, needing anything but the suffocating weight of his betrayal. The night was bitterly cold. I wrapped my shawl tighter around me as I stepped into the darkness of the farmyard. The rain had stopped, but the ground was muddy, my shoes sinking with each step. The barn loomed in the distance, that cursed place where my innocence had ended. I needed answers. Who was Anna, really? What happened to her? Why was she hidden away like a ghost haunting every corner of this farm? The next morning when John left for the fields, I went straight to his study. His desk was locked, but I knew where he kept the spare key taped beneath the drawer. With shaking hands, I unlocked it and began searching. Papers, old receipts, contracts, business letters, and then tucked away in a leather folder, I found another letter. This one wasn't written by John, it was from Anna. My dearest John, it began. I can't keep living in the shadows. You promised me we'd leave, that we'd start over far from the whispers of this farm. But every day you stay with her, every night you choose her over me. I lose a piece of myself. If you don't come for me soon, I'll be gone. And when I leave, it will be forever. The letter was dated only weeks before our wedding. My hands shook so violently I almost tore the paper. She was alive then. She wanted him to choose. And he chose me, or so I thought. I couldn't breathe. My chest rose and fell in frantic bursts as I imagined Anna somewhere out there waiting for him, despising me. Was she gone? Did he leave her? Or did she leave him first? The sound of the front door opening jolted me back to reality. I stuffed the letter into my pocket just as John entered the room. His eyes narrowed when he saw me near his desk. What are you doing in here? He demanded. My heart pounded. Looking for the truth, I snapped. Something you clearly can give me. He stepped closer, his jaw clenched, his voice low and dangerous. Emily, you don't understand. No, I cut him off. I understand perfectly. You lied to me. You married me while still loving her. And now I need to know, where is she? What happened to Anna? His face hardened, and for the first time I saw not just guilt but fear. You don't want to know, he whispered. Those words chilled me to the bone. I shoved past him, tears burning my eyes, and fled the house. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to escape his lies before they swallowed me whole. I found myself at the edge of the farm where the fence met the road. My thoughts spun like a tornado. If John wouldn't tell me the truth, maybe someone else would. His family. They despised me, but maybe, just maybe, they knew more about Anna than they let on. That afternoon, I drove into town and sought out Margaret, John's sister. She was sipping coffee at the diner, her sharp eyes scanning me the moment I walked in. Well, she smirked. The runaway bride returns. What brings you here, Emily? Trouble in paradise already? I sat across from her, my voice steadier than I felt. Tell me about Anna. The smirk vanished from her face. Her coffee cup froze midway to her lips. For a moment, she looked genuinely rattled. Where did you hear that name? She asked, her voice low. I leaned closer. From John. From his letters. Don sit play games with me, Margaret. I know she was real. I know he loved her. And I know you know more than you sit letting on. Her eyes flickered with something, fear, maybe guilt, maybe both. She set her cup down and folded her arms. You shouldn't have gone digging, she said flatly. Anna was complicated. She wasn't who you think she was. Then who was she? I pressed, my pulse racing. Margaret hesitated, her gaze darting around the diner before settling back on me. She was trouble. A storm that nearly destroyed this family once already. And if you search smart, you let her stay buried. Buried. The word echoed in my mind like a sinister bell. I slammed my hands on the table, my desperation boiling over. Tell me the truth, Margaret. Where is she now? What happened to her? Margaret Sett's lips tightened into a thin line. She leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. She disappeared the night before your wedding. Nobody has seen her since. My breath caught. The diner spun around me, the walls closing in. Disappeared? What do you mean disappeared? She shook her head, her eyes dark. Gone, Emily. Without a trace. And John never spoke of her again. Until you, apparently. I staggered out of the diner, my thoughts in chaos. Disappeared. A woman he loved passionately vanished the night before our wedding, and he never told me. He buried her memory beneath vows he never meant, beneath lies he sold as love. And now I couldn't escape the gnawing suspicion. What if John knew exactly what happened to Anna? When I stepped out of the diner, the afternoon light felt cruelly bright, as if the sun itself were exposing every crack in my life for the whole town to see. Disappeared. The word clanged in my head like a rusted bell. If Anna vanished the night before my wedding, what had my wedding actually been? A celebration or a burial of truth? I drove back to the farm with trembling hands, my mind racing ahead of me through the fields, the fences, the shadows that seemed to lengthen with every mile. The house stood quiet when I pulled up, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. I didn't go inside. Not yet. The barn pulled me like a magnet, that place where the first thread of this nightmare snagged and refused to let go. The moment I pushed the door open, the scent of old hay and rain-wet wood hit me, familiar and now forever tainted. I found the loose board again and reached into the darkness behind it, feeling for anything I might have missed. My fingers brushed something cold, metal, small, tangled in a frayed cord. I pulled it free. A tiny locket shaped like a teardrop, tarnished and dented as if it had been gripped too tightly in someone's fist. On the back, engraved in delicate script, was a single initial A. My breath hitched. I snapped it open with my thumbnail. Inside, a faded photograph no bigger than my fingertip, John, younger but unmistakably him, smiling at a woman whose face was half shadowed by her hair. She was beautiful in a way that made me feel suddenly ordinary. On the other side of the locket, taped to the inner rim, a tiny brass key. I held it against the light. It was old-fashioned, the kind meant for a desk drawer or a small lockbox, not a door. My heart thudded. I checked the stall again, running my hands along the back beam, the floorboards. That's when I noticed dark smudges near the corner, almost invisible under dust, but not to me anymore. Burn marks. Someone had tried to burn something here and done it in a hurry. I knelt and brushed the ash aside. A curled scrap of paper flaked up, brittle and blackened. I lifted it gingerly, and one unburned corner revealed a letterhead in deep blue ink, the name of John's lawyer, Harris and Lowe. A fragment of an envelope half burned and half saved by accident. Harris and Lowe. I'd seen their name on farm contracts in John's study. My pulse quickened. I stood, wiped my hands on my jeans, and ran for the truck before I could think twice. The law office was on the far end of town, a brick building with ivy creeping up one side, too quaint for the kind of truth I needed. Inside, the air smelled like paper and air conditioner hummed, safe and sterile, the opposite of me. A receptionist with a careful smile asked for my name, then told me Mr. Harris would see me for a moment. Just one moment. That's all it ever took to ruin a life. He was older than I'd expected, silver-haired with kind eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. Mrs. Whitaker, he said, ushering me into a quiet office. How can I help you? Anna, I said before fear could choke me. I found a letter in our barn from her, a few weeks before my wedding, and a burned fragment with your letterhead. I need to know what's going on. His eyes flickered, but his face didn't move. He folded his hands. I'm afraid I can't discuss the affairs of a client. I leaned forward, desperate. "I am his wife, and I'm his attorney," he replied gently. "There are lines I cannot cross." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Then let me ask you this. Did John ever draft anything that involved Anna?" He didn't answer for a beat. Then, very carefully, he said, "People often draft many things they never sign." My fingers curled into fists in my lap, like a will. He studied me for a long time and then looked away. "Mrs. Whitaker, grief makes people do complicated things. Love does too. I would advise you to be careful. You're not the first person to ask questions about the past, and sometimes answers make the future unlivable." My breath stuttered. "Did someone else come here asking about Anna?" "I can't say. Can you at least tell me if Anna is alive?" His gaze softened in a way that terrified me. "I truly don't know." He stood, signaling the end of our minute. "Whatever you're looking for, be certain you want to find it." Outside, the pavement shimmered with heat. The sky pressed down. I sat in my truck and stared at the key in my palm until the edges left little half-moons in my skin. A draft he never signed. A woman who disappeared. A family that wanted me silent. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. I glanced down and felt ice knife through my veins. Unknown number. Stop digging. The barn keeps secrets for a reason. My hands shook so hard I nearly swerved. I pulled onto the shoulder and stared at the message until it blurred. Whoever sent that knew exactly where I'd been, what I'd done, what I was going to do next. I looked out across the fields, every stalk of corn suddenly a potential witness or an accomplice. When I got back, dusk had drained the color from everything. I didn't go inside the house. I sprinted to the barn, heart hammering, the anonymous text beating in my head like a drum. The door creaked. The darkness seemed thicker than before. I switched on the lantern hanging by the entrance, its cone of light cutting a pale path across the floor. "Whoever you are," I whispered into the shadows, "I'm not stopping." The horses shifted in their stalls, soft snorts and the rustle of straw. I went to the corner near the burn marks and knelt again, feeling along the floorboard seams, the edges where wood met rot. My fingertips grazed a hairline gap, too straight to be a crack. I pressed, and the board gave the tiniest click. I pried it up, breath shallow, and beneath it was a narrow cavity, the kind a person makes when they're hiding something they need to grab fast. Inside, a small scuffed flip phone and a folded piece of paper stained with oil. My mouth went dry. I pulled the phone out first. It was dead, but the battery wasn't swollen with a charge. It might still work. The folded paper was a rough map of the farm's north side, fence line, the old oak, the path to the silo. Next to the silo, someone had scribbled a time and a date, 9 p.m. the night before my wedding. I stumbled back to the house, clutching the phone and the map like they were beating hearts. In the kitchen, I plugged the flip phone into an ancient charger I found in the junk drawer, a graveyard of forgotten cords, then waited, pacing holes in the tile. When the screen finally flickered to life, my breath stopped. One saved contact. No name, one saved voicemail. I'm not your secret anymore. John stood in the doorway to the kitchen, eyes darting from my face to the phone to the mess of cords. "What is that?" he asked, voice rough. "Where did you get that?" I backed away, the counter digging into my spine. "In the barn." With a map to the silo, his jaw flexed. He took a step toward me, palms raised like he was calming a wild animal. "Emily, give me the phone." "Why?" My voice was a stranger's. "So you can erase the past? So you can bury her all over again?" Footsteps sounded on the porch. Margaret's silhouette crossed the window, then she swept in without knocking, her gaze locking onto the phone. "Don't," she snapped at me. "You don't know what you're doing." "I know enough." I shot back. She called him the night before our wedding. She was going to tell me everything. And then she disappeared. Another shadow filled the doorway. John's son, all smoldering resentment and clenched fists. He'd always been a storm waiting for a target. "Give it here," he said, stepping in close, voice tight with fury. "You don't belong in this." "Caleb," John warned, but his warning had no teeth. Caleb flicked a glance at his father that said more than words, "Control this, control her." He reached for the phone. I jerked back. "Don't touch me." The room seemed to shrink around us, air heavy with old secrets and fresh anger. I swallowed, thumb shaking over the phone's menu. "You want to hear it?" I asked. "Let's hear it." I hit play and turned the speaker up. Anna's voice poured into the kitchen again, the desperation in it undeniable. "John, if you don't come tonight, I'm done. I'll tell her everything." John closed his eyes like the words were bullets. Margaret stared at the tile, jaw quivering. Caleb swore under his breath. When the message ended, silence pressed down, suffocating. "What did you do?" I asked, tears finally spilling. "What did you all do to her?" John shook his head, eyes bright with panic. "Emily, no." "Then tell me," I begged. "Tell me what happened by that silo." Caleb's mouth twisted. "This is why she can't stay," he muttered, almost to himself. "This is exactly why." Margaret's gaze snapped to him. "Caleb," she warned, but he lifted his chin, daring her. My hands went numb. "You were there." His stare hardened. "You think you know what you want to know. You don't." "Were you there?" I demanded. He looked at me, then at his father, and something vicious and frightened flickered through his eyes. "I told you to handle it," he said to John. Voice low, every word a blow. "You should have handled it." The room tilted. Cold washed through me, colder than the worst winter. There it was, ugly, raw, impossible to mishear. I clutched the counter to keep from collapsing, a howl rising in my throat that I swallowed back because if I let it out, I knew it would never stop. "Handled what?" I whispered, even though I already knew I would never be able to unknow the answer. "Handled what?" My voice cracked as the words scraped their way out of me. Caleb didn't answer. His stare was fixed on John, daring him to either confess or keep burying the truth. John's silence was heavier than any spoken word, and it crushed me. I stepped closer, the phone trembling in my grip. "Tell me what you did to her. Did you meet her that night? Did you leave her there? Did you silence her because she threatened to tell me?" John Sett's face twisted, his hands raised as though he could physically hold back the accusations. "Emily, it's Sett's not what you think." "Then what is it, John?" My voice shattered into a sob. "Because all I think is that the man I married is a liar who was still in love with another woman the night before our wedding." Margaret moved between us, her presence sharp like a blade. "Stop this before you regret it, Emily." I glared at her. "Why? So the family secret stays safe? So I live my life in the dark while you all protect him?" Her lips thinned. For once, she had no clever retort. Caleb slammed his fist against the wall, making me jump. "You weren't supposed to find out," he spat. "None of this was supposed to touch you." The words cut through the room like lightning. None of this was supposed to touch me, so they had been hiding something. I clutched the phone tighter, my knuckles white. "If you don't, Nina, tell me what happened, I still go to the police." That name, police, hung in the air like a curse. John Sett's shoulders sagged, his voice breaking. "Emily, that night I did meet her, by the silo." The room spun. My vision blurred with hot tears. He had actually gone to her. But when I got there, he continued, she was gone. There was nothing but her scarf on the ground. I searched, I called her name, but she never came. I thought. His words cracked. My breath rattled in my chest. Then who did? The silence that followed was unbearable. Margaret looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at John. No one looked at me. I shoved past them, storming out into the night air. The farm stretched before me, endless and menacing, every shadow a possible grave. The phone in my hand felt heavier than any weapon. I needed to see the silo for myself. The old structure loomed at the edge of the fields, its rusted metal sides creaking in the wind. I had never been this close at night. It looked less like a farm building and more like a tomb. My lantern's weak glow barely pierced the darkness as I circled the base. The ground was uneven, patches of dirt darker than the rest, as if the earth had been disturbed. My heart slammed in my chest. I dropped to my knees and dug my fingers into the soil. It was looser than the surrounding ground, as if it had been turned over not long ago. My breaths came in shallow gasps. I clawed deeper until my fingers scraped fabric. I froze. Hands trembling, I pulled, and from the earth rose a piece of cloth, faded blue, torn stiff with age and dampness. My stomach twisted. It was a scarf, the same scarf John had mentioned. I stumbled back, choking on my own breath. The lantern shook in my hand as I shone it over the patch of dirt. There were more irregular mounds, shallow, uneven. I didn't want to believe it, but the truth screamed at me. Someone had tried to bury something here. Or someone. The crunch of footsteps behind me made me spin. Caleb stood a few feet away, arms crossed, eyes like fire in the glow of my lantern. "You shouldn't be here," he said flatly. My voice shook. "What happened, Caleb? Tell me the truth." He stared at me for a long moment, then looked at the ground where the scarf lay. His jaw tightened. She wouldn't stop. She wanted to ruin everything. My father, this farm, all of it. She wasn't going to leave quietly. I stumbled back. "So you..." "I didn't touch her," he snapped, cutting me off, but his voice cracked. I wanted her to understand, to let it go. But she fought, she screamed, and then she was gone. His words tumbled out, broken, like stones slipping down a cliff. "Down how?" I demanded. His eyes glistened. "She ran into the night. I chased her, but she vanished. And when I came back..." He swallowed hard, looking toward the house. "Dad told me we should never speak of it again." The lantern flickered, casting long, jagged shadows across his face. He looked older in that moment, worn and broken, as if the weight of that night had never left him. I shook my head, backing away. "You all lied to me, every one of you. You let me marry into this family while she was missing, while she could have been..." I couldn't finish the thought. "Emily," Caleb said, his voice softer now. "You don't have to understand. She wasn't what you think. She was dangerous. She wanted to destroy everything." I turned and ran before he could say another word. Inside the house, John was waiting by the door, his face pale, his eyes hollow. He reached for me, but I pushed past him, clutching the scarf like evidence. "I can do this anymore," I whispered. "I can live in a house built on lies." He followed me down the hall, his voice breaking. "Emily, please, I love you." I spun on him, fury blazing through my grief. "You don't love me. You love her. You always loved her. And now she's gone because of you." The words hit him like a blow. His knees buckled, and for a moment, I thought he might collapse. But I didn't stay to watch. I locked myself in our bedroom, slid down the door, and clutched the scarf to my chest, sobbing until the night blurred into morning. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. If they wouldn't give me the truth, I'd dig it out myself. Even if it meant tearing this family apart. Even if it meant destroying what little remained of my marriage. Because I couldn't shake the feeling that Anna hadn't just disappeared. Someone made sure she never came back. The next morning, I woke with swollen eyes and a hollow ache in my chest. The scarf lay crumpled on the nightstand, the blue fabric taunting me with questions I still couldn't answer. I pressed it to my face, inhaling the faint scent of earth and time, and whispered into the silence, "What happened to you, Anna?" The house was quiet. Too quiet. I tiptoed to the kitchen, half expecting John or Caleb to be waiting with more half-truths, but the chairs were empty, the fire cold. They had gone to the fields, or maybe they just didn't want to face me. Either way, I was glad. I needed space to think, to act without their eyes burning into me. The flip phone sat on the counter, its screen black. I picked it up and scrolled through what little it held. One voicemail, one contact. and in the drafts folder, unsent, a single message, "Meet me, I'm ready to end this." The timestamp was the afternoon of the day she disappeared. My hands shook as I closed the phone. This wasn't coincidence. Anna had been planning something, pushing for something right up until she vanished. The small brass key I'd found in the locket pressed cold against my palm when I slipped it out of my pocket. What did it open? I searched the study again, pulling open every drawer, every cabinet, most of them unlocked with the same desk key I'd found before. But at the very bottom of the cabinet, behind stacks of dusty ledgers, I found a small metal box with a rusted clasp. The brass key fit perfectly. And in the final letter, dated the very day before my wedding, she wrote, "John, if you don't come tonight, I'll tell her everything myself. She deserves the truth, even if it destroys you. Meet me at the silo. 9 p.m. This is your last chance." My hands shook as I folded the letter back into the box. She had been ready to confront me. She was ready to end the charade, but she never made it. I stuffed the letters back into the box and locked it again, my mind racing. Who had the most to lose if Anna told me the truth? John? Caleb? Margaret? All of them? My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of tires crunching on gravel. I peeked through the window and saw a black truck I didn't recognize parked in the driveway. A tall man stepped out wearing a sheriff's badge on his belt, Sheriff Donnelly. He was old with silver hair and a stern face. He had been around this town longer than anyone. He knocked on the door. My heart leapt into my throat. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said when I opened it, tipping his hat. "I hear you've been asking questions about Anna." The air seemed to leave the room. How did you? "Small town," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Word travels fast. I said advise you to stop digging, Miss Etum. Some things are best left buried." I stiffened, clutching the box behind me. "Did you know her?" His eyes darkened. "Everyone knew her. Beautiful girl. Wild. Trouble. She stirred things up around here, especially with your husband." My breath caught. "Then you know she disappeared." "Don't see it, you think someone should find out why?" He studied me with that same unreadable expression. "Some folks say she ran away. Others say she got what was coming to her. Me? I say the past don't matter much if it keeps the peace." My blood turned cold. The peace for who? For John? For his family? He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "If I were you, burn those letters you hiding. And forget her name. You got a good life here, Emily. Don't throw it away, chasing ghosts." I stood frozen as he walked out, the screen door slamming behind him. His truck rumbled down the drive, leaving dust and dread in its wake. I collapsed into a chair, clutching the box to my chest. Even the sheriff wanted me silent. That could only mean one thing. Whatever happened to Anna, it wasn't just a family secret. It was a town secret. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Every creak of the house felt like footsteps. Every gust of wind rattling the windows sounded like whispers. At some point, I got up and wandered to the barn, lantern in hand, unable to stay still. The scarf, the phone, the letters, they all pointed to one thing: Anna had been silenced. But by who? I sat on a bale of hay, clutching the scarf when I heard it, a faint noise like the crunch of gravel just outside. I held my breath, the lantern flickering. The door creaked open. Margaret slipped inside, her face pale in the glow. She froze when she saw me. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "I could ask you the same thing," I shot back. Her eyes darted to the corner where the loose board hid the box. "You found them, didn't you?"
My grip tightened. "The letters, the phone, the scarf. Yes, I found them. And I want the truth, Margaret. All of it."
She sighed, shoulders sagging as if the weight of years pressed down on her. "Anna wasn't who you think she was. She wasn't some innocent woman. She used John. She used all of us. She threatened to tear this family apart." "Then why did John love her?" I demanded. "Why did he keep every word she ever wrote?" "Because she knew how to make men weak," Margaret snapped. "But weakness has consequences, and Anna paid hers." My stomach lurched. "What do you mean?" Margaret's eyes glistened in the lantern light. "The night she disappeared, I saw her. I saw her at the silo, and she wasn't alone." My blood ran cold. "With John?" She shook her head slowly. "With Caleb." The air seemed to vanish from the barn. Margaret Sett's voice trembled. You want the truth, Emily? Ask my nephew what he did after she threatened to ruin us all. I stared at Margaret, my pulse thudding in my ears. You saw her with Caleb, I whispered, tasting metal. What did you see? She flinched like she'd already said too much. Enough to know she was going to tear this place apart, she muttered, then drew herself up. Go home, Emily. She slipped out into the night before I could stop her, the barn door yawning after her like a mouth that had swallowed too many secrets. I didn't go home. I stood there in the lantern light with the scarf in my fist and the flip phone heavy in my pocket, feeling the floor tilt beneath me. If she was with Caleb, I had to hear it from him. I wiped my face with my sleeve, killed the lantern, and headed straight for the workshop by the machine shed where Caleb kept his tools and his temper. The shop door was unlocked. Inside, the sharp smell of oil and metal hung in the air. A single bulb burned over a workbench, casting long shadows across a spread of wrenches like a set of crooked teeth. Caleb was there, leaned over an engine block, jaw tight, knuckles raw, like he'd been fighting with machines or himself. He didn't look surprised to see me, he looked resigned. You shouldn't be wandering around out here at night, he said without turning. Townsfolk might get the wrong idea. I don't care what the town thinks, I said, closing the door behind me. I care what happened to Anna. He let out a humorless laugh. Of course you do. I talked to Margaret, I pressed. She saw you with her by the silo that night. That got him. His shoulders went rigid. Slowly, he turned. His eyes were puffy, rimmed in red. Under the grease and the anger, he looked like a boy who's been lost in a field too long. And what does my dear aunt say I did? She told me to ask you. I took a step closer. So I sat masking. What did you do after she threatened to ruin you all? He wiped his hands on a rag, stalling. You think saying it makes it true? I think not saying it tells me everything I need to know. For a long moment, the only sound in the shop was the tick of cooling metal. They slipped my hand into my jacket pocket and tapped my phone screen, slid to the recorder without looking. If he was going to confess, it would not vanish into the night like she did. He saw the resolve in my face, and something in his broke. She called me, he said finally, voice rough. Not my father, me. Said if I didn't make him choose, she would. Said she show up at your door in a white dress just to make sure you understood whose ring really mattered. My throat tightened. Why would she call you? Because she knew I'd do anything to keep this place standing. He gestured at the walls, at the racks of tools, out toward the fields beyond them. Do you have any idea what it costs to run this farm? What it took after Mom died? I was 16, Emily. 16 and up at 4 a.m. every day, so he didn't lose the only thing he cares about, besides himself. And besides her, I said softly. He winced, like I'd struck him. She wasn't just a fling. He was gonna change the will. He spat the words like acid. Mr. Harris drafted it. Half to her. Half split between me and Aunt Margaret. The house to Anna. The barn to Anna. The pastures, he broke off. Jaw clenched. We would have lost control of everything. I pictured the leather folder in John's desk, the careful way the lawyer wouldn't answer me, a draft he never signed, or one he intended to sign until a different kind of ink-dried first fear. So you met her at the silo, I pressed, heart battering at my ribs. What happened? He licked his cracked lips. It was dark, windy. She was worked up, pacing, hair everywhere. She said Dad was a coward. Said she'd already left a note somewhere I'd never find it, that you would read it on your wedding night and watch him flinch at the altar. He shook his head. I told her to take the money and go, that I'd make sure she got enough to start over anywhere. She laughed in my face, said she didn't want charity, she wanted our name on the deed. She said she was coming to the house right then. And you stopped her? My voice was barely air. I grabbed her arm. She yanked away. I grabbed again. She shoved me and the rag twisted in his hands until it tore. He stumbled and fell hard. Hit her head on the edge of the concrete pad. She swore. She swore, got up, shoved me again, and told me to tell Dad he had 1 hour or she'd burn the place to the ground. Start with the barn, because the barn kept all his oldest lies. The text flashed through me like a blade. Stop digging. The barn keeps secrets for a reason. A cold, ugly thread knotted 2 moments together. What then? I whispered. I left, he said, staring at the floor. I went to find Dad to make him come down there and end it. He wasn't in the house. I drove the back road to the south field. He wasn't there either. When I got back, the scarf was on the ground and she was gone. He looked up, eyes wet. I swear to God, I didn't kill her. You called someone, I said. Pulse climbing. Who? His mouth flattened. He looked past me, through me. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. His fingers flexed. He closed his eyes and said it so low I almost didn't hear. The sheriff. The room tilted. Sheriff Donnelly Sitz, leathered face, swam up in my mind. The way he told me to burn the letters. He came here. He told me to go home and keep my mouth shut, Caleb said, voice bitter, said he'd handle it. He said the town would not survive another scandal with our name on it, said this place fed a lot of families, and if the papers got wind of a mess, banks start calling notes and hired hands start looking for other fields. He said I could either save the farm or doom it. My stomach lurched. The law wasn't blind here, it wore a badge and kept its eyes closed. What about Margaret? I asked. She said she saw you with Anna. She did, he said flatly. Driving by with that vulture stare she does, collecting sins like seed. Later, she came over and told me there are things women are better at cleaning up than men. I didn't ask what she meant. He scrubbed a hand over his face. I don't know what happened after I left Emily. I just know the next morning Dad asked me if I was ready to put on a suit and watch a good woman walk down the aisle while we both pretended we were decent men. The shop spun in slow circles around me. I swallowed hard, fighting the burn behind my eyes. You realize what you saying, I managed. The sheriff handled it. Your aunt cleaned up. And my husband met a ghost at the altar. He flinched. You asked for the truth. Not this truth, I whispered, because I had begged for the thing that would break me. He took a step closer, hands open like a plea. Emily, I never hated you. Not really, I hated what you represented. How easy it seemed for you to take a place at his table. But you didn't deserve this. None of it. Don't you dare pity me, I said, my voice suddenly steady. I slipped my phone deeper in my pocket, the recorder still rolling, a tiny silent witness. You're going to go on record with Harris, with anyone who will listen outside this county line. If she disappeared and the sheriff made sure that disappearance stuck, I will not let that rot inside me like a second heart. He laughed then, a sharp broken sound. You think Harris will help you? He drafted a will that tried to make room for a woman who didn't belong. He learned his lesson. The town taught him. The town isn't stuck, I said, and neither is your father. His jaw worked. Then he looked over my shoulder and the air in the room changed. I turned. John stood in the doorway, gray with exhaustion, eyes hollowed out. For a second, he looked like he'd aged 10 years since morning. How much did you hear? I asked. Enough, he rasped, stepping inside. He looked at his son a long time, something like grief, twisting his features into a stranger's sets. You should have told me everything, Caleb. Caleb Sett's mouth curled. And you had done what? Called your girlfriend and asked her nicely to stop threatening your wife? John flinched like it landed. He closed the distance to me by a step and stopped as if there was a line he was afraid to cross. Emily, he said, voice breaking, I didn't know the sheriff was involved. I swear to you, I went to the silo and she wasn't there. I found the scarf. I thought she'd run. Did you plan to change the will? The question scraped my throat on the way out. He closed his eyes. I planned to make sure everyone had what they needed, he said carefully. Translation, yes, Caleb muttered. John Sett's eyes snapped to him. I never signed anything. You didn't need to, I said. A draft can be motive enough. No one spoke. The bulb over the bench buzzed and hummed like an insect trapped in a jar. Outside, wind scraped through the oaks, a low, steady hiss like the land was whispering all the names it had eaten. My phone buzzed in my pocket and I flinched. A new text from the unknown number. You're making a mistake. Don't meet him at 9. I went cold. I hadn't told anyone a time. Then my gaze snagged on the flip phone sitting on the bench where I'd set it down, its tiny screen black as a lid. The map, the voicemail, the scribbled 9 p.m. The past felt alive, tugging at my sleeve. Who sent this? I demanded, holding up the message. Who is he? John stared at the phone like it might bite him. Caleb's eyes flicked to my pocket, then to the shop window, measuring distances like a caged thing. Answer me, I said. Caleb Sett's jaw worked. Don't Sets go to the silo, he said finally. Whatever you think you Sets will find, it Sets worse. I don't take instructions from men who bury the truth, I snapped. Emily, John pleaded, please. Please what? I asked. Please keep pretending with you? Please ignore the ghost in your vows? No. I shoved the phone into my pocket, every nerve jangling. At 9, I'm going to the silo. If there's nothing there, you can all breathe easier. If there is, you'll hear me scream from the road. I turned for the door. Caleb grabbed my arm. Not hard, not like a threat, more like a drowning man catching a branch. I can let you go alone. You don't get to decide what I do, I said, yanking free. I mean it, he said, and for once I believed him. If Donnelly Set's involved, he once said, let you walk away again. Again. The word was a stone lobbed into black water. Then follow at a distance, I said, bring a shovel or a conscience. I left them standing there with the machines and the ghosts and walked into the wind that pulled at my hair and whispered through the fields. The sky was the color of bruised peaches, sun sinking, the day bleeding out. I went to the house, grabbed the lantern, the locket, the box of letters. I tucked my phone into my boot and the flip phone into my jacket. As I headed toward the silo, the first stars pricked through the dark, and for a moment I wanted to turn around and sleep for a week in a world where pieces of paper couldn't decide whether people lived or vanished. But that world was gone. At 9 o'clock, I would know whether mine ended with it. The path to the silo had never felt so long. Each step sank into damp soil, and each breath rasped in my throat as if the air itself didn't want me going there. The lantern swung in my hand, casting nervous light over the fields that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. Somewhere behind me, I thought I heard Caleb's boots crunching the dirt, but when I turned, there was only wind and corn whispering against itself. The silo loomed ahead, a rusted giant in the dark. Its shadows stretched across the earth like a warning finger. I gripped the lantern tighter and whispered, Anna, if you sir here, show me. At the base of the silo, the ground was uneven, scarred from years of use. My lantern's glow caught on something half buried near the padlock that sealed the hatch. I knelt, fingers trembling, and brushed dirt away until I uncovered a wooden box no bigger than a loaf of bread. My heart pounded so loud I was afraid it might draw the whole farm awake. I pried it open. Inside were scraps of paper, faded photographs, and, God, an engagement ring. A simple gold band with a small diamond, dull with age but unmistakable. My chest tightened. This wasn't mine. This was Anna's. One photograph showed her standing beside John, smiling in the sunlight. He looked younger, freer. They weren't set, just lovers. They had planned a life. My hands shook as I turned over the photo. On the back in Anna Sett's careful handwriting were 4 words, forever starts this time. My vision blurred. That night wasn't just a secret meeting, it was supposed to be a beginning. A twig snapped behind me. I whirled, lantern swinging wildly. Caleb stood a few feet away, shovel in hand, his face pale. I told you not to come, he said, his voice carrying in the still air. You knew this was here, I accused, holding up the box. You buried her future. He flinched. I didn't bury anything. Then who did? Before he could answer, headlights swept across the field. A truck rumbled down the dirt path, kicking up a storm of dust. The sheriff's truck. Caleb cursed under his breath. He followed us. The truck stopped, its beams blinding. Sheriff Donnelly stepped out, shotgun cradled casually in his arms as if he were just checking on livestock. Evening, he said, voice calm but heavy. I warned you, Emily. My throat closed. You knew, you've always known. He sighed, shaking his head. This land feeds a lot of mouths. Sometimes one mouth has to close for the rest to survive. Caleb stepped forward, jaw tight. You told me you handled it, that it was over. Donnelly Sett's eyes narrowed. And I would kept it that way if she had gone poking in barns that Don Sett belonged to her. He raised the shotgun slightly, not aiming but enough to freeze me where I stood. "Where is she, Sheriff?" My voice shook, but I forced the words out. "Where is Anna?" He stared at me for a long, unbearable moment. Then he looked at the silo. The earth shifted beneath my feet, not literally, but in my gut. He didn't need to say it. I knew. I dropped to my knees and began clawing at the dirt. Caleb joined me, shoving his shovel into the ground with frantic strength. Donnelly's voice cracked like a whip. "Stop." Neither of us listened. The soil gave way, darker and looser than the rest. My lantern light caught on fabric. Not just a scarf this time. A dress. I screamed. Caleb dropped to his knees beside me, pulling away more dirt until bones glimmered pale beneath the soil. Donnelly Sitt's voice thundered behind us. I said, "Stop." The shotgun cocked, the sound slicing through the night. I froze, chest heaving, hands coated in earth and death. Caleb rose slowly, shovel in hand, his body blocking me. "You can't bury her twice," he growled. Donnelly Sitt's jaw tightened. "Step aside, boy." "Or what?" Caleb spat. "You still shoot me too?" The sheriff's finger flexed on the trigger. The world seemed to shrink to 3 heartbeats, mine, Caleb's, and the echo of Anna's in the dirt. Then another voice cut through the tension. "Drop it." "John." He stood at the edge of the headlights, a pistol in his hand. His face was hollow, his eyes shadows. "Dad," Caleb began, but John silenced him with a look. "This ends tonight," John said, his voice low, steady. He aimed the pistol at Donnelly. "No more lies, no more graves." The sheriff Sitt's mouth twisted. "Careful, John. You pull that trigger and you Setch know better than me." John's hand shook, but his aim didn't falter. "I already am," he whispered. My breath caught. I saw in his face the years of guilt, the nights of silence, the weight of secrets that had eaten him alive. For a long moment, the night held its breath. Then Donnelly lowered the shotgun slowly, deliberately, and let it drop into the dirt. The silence that followed was deafening. Caleb sank to the ground, shoulders heaving. I clutched the scarf tighter, the reality pressing down. Anna was here all along, beneath the soil we walked every day. John stepped closer, his pistol still trembling in his hand. He looked at me then, his eyes raw. "Emily, I didn't kill her, but I let them bury her truth. I let the farm matter more than the woman I swore I loved. And for that, I shall never forgive myself." The sheriff broke the silence. "You have made your choice, John. Now you live with it." "No," I said, rising to my feet. My voice was hoarse but steady. "We all live with it, but tomorrow the world will know too." I held up my phone. The screen glowed with the red dot of a recording still running. Donnelly Sitt's face drained of color. "This farm has been built on silence," I said, "but silence ends tonight." The recording burned like fire in my pocket. For the first time since I found that letter, the power was in my hands. Not theirs, not the sheriff's, not John's. Donnelly Sitt's eyes were sharp slits under the headlights. "You think some recording changes anything? I kept this town safe for 30 years. They believe me before they believe a girl who married into money." "I don't need them to believe me," I said, my voice trembling but steady. "I only need the truth to breathe." John's pistol wavered in the silence. His face was a battlefield, guilt, rage, love, fear. Caleb crouched by the shallow grave, dirt on his hands, his eyes darting between his father and the sheriff like a trapped animal. "I once let her rot here another night," I said, looking at the scarf, the bones, the broken ring glinting in the lantern light. "She deserves her name back, her story. And I deserve mine." The sheriff stepped closer, his boots sinking into the soil. "Then you bring everything down? The farm? The town? Him?" He jabbed a finger at John. "You think you are the first woman to learn what he hides? You are just the one too stubborn to shut up?" Caleb rose then, his shovel clutched like a staff. "Enough," he snapped. "I'm done carrying your sins. All of you." His eyes shone wet. "I'm not covering for anyone anymore." "Not you," he glared at the sheriff. "Not him," he pointed at his father. "I've lived in shadows my whole life. I want the sun, even if it burns." The sheriff's jaw tightened, but his hand stayed still. The air was heavy with something final. I turned to John. "Say it." I demanded. "Say her name." His eyes met mine, and for a moment he looked like a man stripped bare, no wealth, no land, just a broken heart that never healed. Anna, he whispered, his voice cracking. Her name was Anna, and I failed her. Tears stung my eyes, and you failed me. The pistol slipped from his hand, landing in the dirt with a dull thud. He sank to his knees, burying his face in his hands, and for the first time I saw my husband not as a liar or a farmer or even a father, just as a man who had lost everything to his own cowardice. The sheriff exhaled through his nose, a sound like disappointment. So this is how it ends, not with justice, with weakness. I lifted my phone higher. No, Sheriff, it ends with proof. Behind us, the rumble of an engine shattered the silence. Headlights cut across the field. Another truck pulled up, dust swirling. My heart leapt into my throat until I saw who climbed out. Margaret. She strode toward us, her coat pulled tight against the wind, her eyes sharp as knives. What have you done? She hissed when she saw the open grave, the bones, the box. The truth, I said. She sneered. Truth doesn't keep farms running. Truth doesn't feed people. She looked at John. You let her do this? You let her dig it all up? John didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. Margaret's face twisted. You stupid, selfish man. You still lose everything. Then, let me lose it, John said hoarsely. I can live like this anymore. Margaret turned on me, her voice venom. Do you think anyone will thank you, girl? You think the world loves the messenger? You still leave here alone, penniless, hated, and she still be dead. Her words cut, but they didn't kill. I straightened my spine. I rather be hated for the truth than loved for a lie. She lunged for my phone, but Caleb blocked her path. Enough, Aunt, he said. His voice was low, final. You had your grip on this family long enough. For a moment, Margaret looked at him like he was a stranger. Then her lip curled and she stepped back, her hands trembling. The sheriff finally bent and picked up his shotgun, but instead of aiming it, he slung it over his shoulder. She's not worth my badge, he muttered. But this town will eat itself alive when you drag her name through the papers. Then let it, I said. Maybe it needs to choke on the truth. He studied me a long time, then spat into the dirt. Without another word, he climbed into his truck and drove off, swallowed by the dark. The grave was open, the past unearthed, the silence broken. And for the first time, I felt like Anna was standing beside me, free. But freedom came with a price. By the time dawn bled across the horizon, I was sitting on the farmhouse porch, the box of letters beside me, the scarf draped across my lap. John sat inside, silent, broken. Caleb leaned against the railing, eyes red, face hard. Margaret was gone. I stared at the fields, at the land that had swallowed so much. My marriage was ashes. My trust was dust. But Anna's voice would not be silenced again. I shall take this to the police in the next county, I whispered, more to myself than anyone. I shall give them the letters, the phone, the recording. Whatever happens, happens. Caleb sets, jaw clenched, and if they cover it up too? Then I shall go further, I said, my voice steady. The press, the courts, the world, someone will listen. He nodded slowly, like he'd known all along that this was where we were headed. Inside, I heard John Sett's chair scrape against the floor. He stepped out onto the porch, his face pale, his eyes hollow but resolute. Emily, he said softly, whatever comes, I won't stop you. I looked at him, the man who had once been my entire world. You already did. He flinched, but he didn't argue. The wind carried the scent of rain, of soil, of endings. I rose, clutching the scarf, and walked down the steps. The farm stretched out before me, endless and heavy, but for the first time I wasn't afraid of its shadows, because I carried its darkest secret in my hands. And I wasn't letting go. The next day, I drove to the county seat with the box of letters on the passenger seat, the scarf folded like a flag in my lap, and the flip phone tucked against my heartbeat. The road was long and straight and felt like a confession. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. If the farm was behind me, it could stay there until the law took its turn. At the station, a detective with a tired face and a coffee that smelled like resolve led me into a small room with a metal table. I set the evidence down one piece at a time. I told him everything from the board in the barn to the silo at 9, from the sheriff's shotgun to the bones in the dirt. I handed over my phone with the recording, Anna's letters, the locket with the key that had opened a box no one wanted opened. When I finished, my voice was a thread. He didn't look away, he didn't tell me to go home. He called a team. He called a judge, he called another county to avoid conflicts. He called the state lab. By the time I stepped back into the daylight, the sky had clouded over the way the world does before it finally lets go. 2 cruisers followed me out of town. We reached the farm as unmarked vans pulled in and men and women in jackets I'd only seen in movies stepped out carrying cases. Caleb met us at the gate, eyes swollen with the kind of fear that looks like relief. John stood on the porch, hands at his sides, the way a man stands when he's already surrendered something no one can take back. Margaret was nowhere in sight. They cordoned off the silo, they photographed the ground and the box and the ring, and then they did what the town never would. They put their hands into the earth with purpose. I watched from the fence line, arms wrapped around myself, as a small white tent rose like a confession over the past. At some point a neighbor stopped at the end of the drive, then another, then a cluster, polite distance disguising hunger. The sheriff's truck didn't appear. For the first time since his warning at my door, I felt like his shadow had a shape I could see around. It took hours, the slow, careful hours of science and care. A tech asked for my scarf and cataloged its stains. Another bagged the flip phone. When they finally lifted a small shape wrapped in time and patience from the earth, the wind went quiet. No one spoke her name, but I heard it everywhere. Anna, Anna. They took John's statement. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He sat on the porch and told the truth in a low voice to a recorder like the one that had saved me. He said he'd loved her and he'd let other people decide what his soul could live with. He said a sheriff he'd known since boyhood had told him it was handled, and he had let that be enough. He said he'd married me because he was tired of being alone and thought vows could shame the past quiet. When the detective asked him about the will draft, he nodded once. When asked if he'd changed his mind, he nodded again. When asked if that mattered anymore, he said no. Caleb told them about the push, the fall, the threat, the frantic drive, the return to an empty patch of ground and a scarf. He didn't paint himself soft, he didn't make himself a hero. For the first time since I'd known him, he sounded like a man and not a son. By dusk, the sheriff had been relieved of his badge and placed into a cruiser that did not use its sirens. He didn't look at me when they walked him past the fence. He looked at the fields like they might argue his case. Some men believe land is a god who can absolve. The Cuffs disagreed. The news traveled faster than the patrol car. By midnight, the diner where Margaret liked to spit sugar with her venom was full of low voices and high eyebrows. Did you hear? At the silo, the young wife, the letters, the sheriff. I lay awake on the guest room bed and watched the shadows of tires move across the ceiling and felt nothing like triumph. Truth is not a victory banner. It's a weight that finally sits in the right hands. In the morning, a social worker from the victim liaison unit pressed a warm paper cup into my palm and asked if I had somewhere safe to stay. I said I didn't know. She said she could book me a room in town. I said town was the problem. She said there were other places. I said I needed to go back to the house to get a few things. She offered to come with me. I said yes. The house felt like someone else's life had been interrupted mid-sentence. A mug on the counter, a jacket on the chair, the catalog on the table folded to a page where John had circled a new rain gauge with a fountain pen, because even small measurements mattered to him. He was on the porch, eyes red, knuckles white. He didn't try to touch me. He didn't ask if I was coming back. He simply said, "I'm sorry," in a voice that sounded like a shovel hitting stone. "I know," I said, and I meant it. He was sorry the way a dam is sorry when it breaks. Sorrow doesn't rebuild the house downstream. I packed a bag, a dress I loved, a sweater that smelled like sun, the photograph of my mother in a wooden frame that had survived all my moves. I paused at our bedroom door and looked at the bed that had held so many nights, good and bad. Then I closed the door and walked down the hall like I was leaving a museum that displayed a life I had tried on and found didn't fit. On the porch, I set the box of letters between us. "These are the last of them," I said. "They belong to the investigation now. Not to you. Not to me." He nodded, eyes on the wood grain, and then looked up. "The lawyer called," he said. "Harris." He said, "When this is over, there'll be consequences. For me. For Caleb. Maybe for Margaret. Maybe for the estate." He asked if I wanted him to represent us. He laughed once, softly. "What did you say?" I said I wanted him to represent the truth. He swallowed. I signed a statement waiving privilege. He nearly choked. I didn't know whether to be proud of him or devastated by how late he had learned to be a man. Caleb came around the corner, face gaunt with no sleep, and stopped when he saw my bag. He looked at his father, then at me, and for a heartbeat I saw the boy under the anger. "I'm sorry," he said, and I believed him because there wasn't anything left to gain from lying. "If you need anything, money, the truck, a place for a night, I need you to tell the truth until there's nothing left to tell," I said. "In court, to reporters, to yourself." He nodded, throat working. Margaret appeared like a storm cloud at the end of the drive, stepped out of a cab, and marched toward the porch with lips pursed as if she could press the day into a different shape. She took one look at the cruiser parked by the barn and stopped. For once, she didn't have a sentence ready. She just looked old. "John said come after me," I said to her quietly. "Not with words, not with people, not with money. Let me go." Her shoulders dropped. "You won't last out there," she said, but there was no poison in it, only a kind of tired prediction that sounded like something she'd been told once and never questioned. I didn't answer. She turned away, smaller than I had ever seen her. I left the farm in a car that wasn't mine, with a suitcase that felt too light for a life. The liaison put me in a motel 2 towns over, where the air conditioner rattled like applause and the ice machine was a chorus. I sat on a bedspread that looked like old wallpaper and dialed a number a reporter had slipped me that morning at the fence line. I told her my name, I told her Anna's. I told her I had something that wasn't a story but a ledger. She met me in a coffee shop that didn't know my face, and I slid a copy of the recording across to her on a thumb drive, along with photographs of the letters I had made before turning them in and a scanned image of the map with the time and date. I didn't feel brave. I felt like the opposite of a secret. The piece ran by dusk, measured in merciless names, dates dated, quotes heavy as stones. The sheriff's past cases looked suddenly fragile under new light. The phones in the county building rang until the switchboard gave up and blinked like a body. The next day, a woman I had never met stood at the edge of our gravel drive holding a sign that said her name was Anna. By afternoon, there were a dozen signs, by night candles. I went back once more, not for the house, not for John, but for her. There was a small cross near the silo now, not from us, but from the women in town who knew what it was to love men who loved land more than anything with a pulse. They had tied pieces of ribbon to it, blue, like her scarf. I knelt in the dirt, touched the place where the earth had given her up, and laid a wild flower down. I whispered the words from the back of the photograph, "Forever starts this time." I meant it differently than she had. Forever wasn't a promise between lovers. It was the kind of truth that didn't die when men decided it was inconvenient. The divorce papers arrived a week later, crisp and bloodless. I signed them at a library table under a poster about summer reading, and the clerk notarized my ruins with a stamp that sounded like a door closing. John didn't contest anything. In a letter that came 2 days after the decree, he wrote that he was selling a portion of the acreage to pay legal fees and to establish a scholarship in Anna's name at the agricultural school in the next county for girls who wanted to learn how to make the land feed people without ever letting it starve them. He said he knew it wasn't enough. He said nothing would be. He said he hoped someday I would remember a morning we had shared that had no lies in it. I put the letter in a drawer and closed it gently. Caleb pled to a charge the prosecutor called truth adjacent, a tangle of obstruction and assault that sounded like the law trying to learn how to say sorry in public. He agreed to testify against the sheriff if it came to that. He stopped drinking. He started showing up at community meetings and saying my fault in rooms that did not forgive easily. Margaret left for a sister's house out of state, and the town exhaled like a weather system had moved on. The sheriff lawyered up and glared in every photograph while his attorney said words like alleged and circumstantial into microphones that recorded the unspooling of a rain that had never looked like one to people who were allowed to sleep at night. I rented a small apartment above a florist where mornings smelled like green stems and wet paper. I worked days at the shop, tied ribbons around arrangements for births and apologies, and wrote at night long letters to a woman I never knew but felt like I had. I started them all the same way. Dear Anna, today the wind sounded like a door opening. I didn't know who I was outside the farm yet, outside the marriage, outside the mystery, but identity, it turns out, is another kind of field. You plant, you wait, you weed the lies, you water what's real. Some days nothing grows. Some days a shoot appears so small you think you imagined it. You keep going anyway. People recognize me in grocery aisles and parking lots, Some said thank you like I had handed them a map out of something. Some said nothing and looked away like I had ruined a story they liked better. Once a woman my age stopped me and pressed a folded note into my hand. He did it to me too, it said. A different man, a different town. Thank you for making a hole in the ground we can speak through. I cried in my car until the windshield fogged, and then I drove to the county line and kept going until the road forgot my name. On the anniversary of the night she vanished, a handful of us met at the silo. John came gaunt and quiet, hair gone suddenly whiter. Caleb stood on the edge of the circle, hands in his pockets, not asking for forgiveness because he finally understood that wasn't mine to give. The detective who had first listened stood near the back, hat in his hands. We said her name out loud. We read one of her letters, not the angriest, not the last, but one from the middle, where she wrote about the way stars look from a field with no city to dim them and how love can be clarity until it becomes a fog. I read it because my voice was the one that had carried her story this far, and when I finished, I felt something ease in my chest I hadn't known was clenched. I don't live on the farm anymore. I don't live in the shadow of men who mistake silence for peace. My marriage ended the night I found the letter in the barn, even if the paperwork took longer to catch up. It did destroy my marriage overnight. That letter. It also saved something I didn't have a name for then, the part of me that refuses to build a life on a grave. When I lie awake now, it isn't because I'm listening for boots on gravel or trucks on the road. It's because I'm writing in my head sentences about truth and land and the ways love can hide inside both and poison the well if left unchecked. Sometimes I dream of the barn before I knew what it held, sky leaking rain through the tin roof, the smell of hay and horses, the simple truth of work. In those dreams, I always walk to the corner where the board is loose. I always pause. Sometimes I choose not to pull it back. The dream ends with me leaving the barn and walking into a life still intact. I wake up grateful I didn't get that world. I wake up grateful for this one, bruised and honest, soft where it matters. I wake up and I say her name and then I say mine, and both names sound like beginnings.